They fired me at 4:17 p.m. Right on the factory floor. Between the machines I once treated like living things. They said I was the danger. But danger was the only language this company ever understood. And now, it's my turn to speak it. They fired me at 4:17 p.m. on a Tuesday. Not in a conference room. Not in HR's glass box on the third floor. They fired me right on the factory floor, between press line 4 and the pallet racks stacked with unfinished steel parts. Because humiliation works better when it smells like burned oil and hot metal. My name is Elena Ward, 34, Senior Process Engineer at Iron Vale Manufacturing, a Midwestern plant that stamped steel parts for heavy-duty trucks. The air that afternoon tasted like metal filings and old coffee. The sodium lights above hummed faintly like a dying warning signal. Everyone, can I get your attention? That was Grant Rook, plant manager. Tan vest. White helmet. Clipboard tucked under his arm like a shield. Production line slowed. One press after another fell silent, until the entire bay felt like it was holding its breath. Then they said it. That a safety interlock on press 4 had been intentionally bypassed. That it caused Caleb Jensen, a press operator with a 3-year-old son, to lose 2 fingers. And that the authorization for the override came from process engineering. Came from me. Cynthia Marsh from HR opened a manila folder like it was a Bible of sins. Elena, Grant said, soft and rehearsed. Your name is on the authorization. The crowd turned. Men I'd worked beside for years. Operators who'd called me during midnight breakdowns. Maintenance techs I'd shared cheap vending machine coffee with. Now they stared like I was a ghost, haunting the wrong shift. The signature that damned me. 3 nights earlier, I sat at my kitchen table at 10:41 p.m., approving a maintenance request I shouldn't have approved. But I didn't know that yet. The request: override a faulty sensor causing false stops on line 4. Just for the night. Until the part arrived Monday. I'd flagged that sensor twice. Requested shutdown. Denied every time. Midland Trucks, our biggest client, was breathing down our necks for a rush order. I could either 1. Shut the line down, lose the contract, risk layoffs. 2. Approve a temporary override with strict conditions. I typed. Approved until 6. Guard stays on. 2 hand controls only. No manual clearing. E. Ward. And clicked submit. 1 signature in a system full of signatures. 3 days later, Caleb screamed as the press came down. Public execution. Cynthia announced my termination in front of everyone. Severance packet. NDA. Security escort. Miguel, one of the operators, yelled it was bullshit. But it didn't matter. They needed someone to bleed in front of the workers to prove they still cared about safety. And I was convenient. I removed my badge, folded it neatly, placed it on the press 4 control console, and walked out. Not dramatic. Not theatrical. Just ending. But endings have a way of becoming beginnings, when the right truth is buried under the wrong lies. The lonely aftermath. Days blurred. Job applications. Sleepless nights. The sound of a press slamming in my dreams. Then I opened my old hard drive. Inside it, 6 years of spreadsheets, logs, and data, including one file they thought no one had ever noticed. Scrap rate. TrueV's reported. Internal only. XLSX. The numbers were damning. Iron Vale had been falsifying scrap data on Midland control arms. Thousands of defective parts had been quietly pushed out the door to keep contracts alive. Parts that could fail. Parts that could kill. And then, 2 weeks after I was fired, a headline. Multi-vehicle accident on I-94. Possible mechanical failure in Midland truck. My blood went cold. Suspension. Control arms. Our parts. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe not. But I knew one thing. If Iron Vale kept running like this, someone would die. Not lose fingers. Die. That was when the reluctant Avenger in me finally stopped whispering and started choosing sides. Not theirs. The first steps of war. I contacted a whistleblower nonprofit. Learned that NDAs cannot stop someone from reporting safety violations or crimes. I built a timeline. Organized evidence. Backed up every file on encrypted drives. And then, Caleb messaged me. They want me to sign a settlement. Feels too fast. He was right. They wanted him quiet. The same way they wanted me erased. Me. Don't sign yet. Get a lawyer. I'll help you find one. He replied. Caleb, why are you helping me? You could walk away. I answered. Because if I walk away and someone else gets hurt, I'll never forgive myself. There was a long pause. Then he wrote. They messed with the wrong engineer, didn't they? Yes. They had. And Ironvale had no idea the countdown to their collapse had just begun. The snow arrived early that year, thin at first, dust on windshields, ice on gutters, then thick enough to turn the world outside my apartment into a washed-out gray canvas. Factories always looked different in winter. Or maybe I did. Either way, Ironvale felt colder now than the weather ever could. I stood by my kitchen window, cup of coffee cooling between my palms, watching the snow settle in silence. That silence was starting to feel like a second language, a place where thoughts sharpened instead of softened. My laptop sat open on the table behind me. Folders. Evidence. A map of everything they'd buried. The next step wasn't about anger. It was about precision. I was an engineer. Precision was the only thing I'd ever believed in. 1. The call from the inside. At 11:32 a.m. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I let it ring twice before answering. Elena? A voice whispered. Breathless. Uneven. It took me a second to recognize it. Rick Kessler. Maintenance supervisor. The man who'd sent me the override request the night before Caleb's accident. He sounded like he was calling from a closet with the lights off. Rick? We have to talk, he said. Not over the phone. Not here. Where are you? Lunch break. In my truck. He exhaled shakily, breath fogging against the receiver. Elena. They're saying you told us the guard didn't have to be in place. I gripped the edge of the counter. They're lying. I know. His voice cracked. I know. But they pulled me into a meeting this morning. Victor. Grant. Corporate legal. They showed me a statement. Said if I didn't sign, they'd consider my future at Ironvale. A coldness coiled behind my ribs. What did the statement say? That you authorized the override without safety conditions, and that I'd told you the guard was off and you approved it. My God, I whispered. They're trying to make me the second link in the chain, Rick said, voice trembling. First you, then me. Once I'm gone, the story is clean. Corporate oversight. Unforeseeable accident. No systemic negligence. I closed my eyes. This wasn't about one accident. This was a purge. They want someone else to blame, I said. They want everyone who knows the truth gone. I heard him swallow. Elena, someone's going to die if they keep running line 4 like this. I stared at the snow falling in slow spirals. Each flake felt like an hourglass grain, marking the time Ironvale had left. Meet me tonight, I said. Not at Ironvale. Not anywhere public. Where? Griffin Overlook, I said without thinking. A quiet hill outside town. No cameras. No foot traffic after dark. Rick hesitated. Okay. 8? 8. He hung up. The silence afterward felt sharp enough to cut with. 2. The hidden folder. Before meeting Rick, I wanted to do something I'd been avoiding. I opened the external drive again and navigated to a folder I'd labeled deliberately vague. 2024? Audit prep? MISC? It wasn't audit prep. It was a graveyard of things I'd seen and didn't want to believe. I clicked. Inside were 5 subfolders. Internal memos. Shift reports. Raw. Quality variance. GenSep. Vendor complaints. Unfiltered. Training records. Missing signatures. I opened the last one. Rows and rows of training logs for safety protocols, equipment certifications, lockout, tagout refreshers. Entire months missing signatures. Dozens of workers marked as trained when I knew they hadn't been in the sessions. Some of the signatures looked copy-pasted. Others were forged outright. And next to the supervisor signature boxes, I saw a familiar name stamped over and over. G. Rook. Grant. Plant manager. The man who had announced my termination with a voice that shook a little, like even he wasn't convinced of the script he'd memorized. I'd always thought Grant was just a corporate yes-man. Now I wasn't sure he wasn't the center of something deeper. I opened another memo. Further delays in Midland shipments will result in contract penalties. We cannot allow production targets to slip due to non-critical safety issues. FAV Hale VP Operations. Non-critical. Caleb's missing fingers flashed in my mind. Non-critical. I closed the laptop before my hands could start shaking. 3. The meeting at Griffin Overlook. Night settled early in winter. By 8 p.m., Griffin Overlook was swallowed in darkness, the only light coming from distant town lamps and the faint glow of a half-moon. Rick's truck was parked under a leafless oak tree. I pulled in behind him. He climbed out, shoulders hunched, face pale in the cold. "Thank you for coming," he said. "I didn't have a choice," I replied. He exhaled, breath clouding. "I kept copies of everything," he said, voice low. "Emails, notes, screenshots, even some machine logs. I didn't trust them after what happened." A knot tightened in my chest. "You have evidence?" "More than they realize." He reached into his coat and pulled out a USB drive. "This is just part of it," he said. "If they fire me tomorrow, I'm not going down alone." I took it. The metal was freezing against my palm. "What else do you know, Rick?" He looked around as if the trees themselves had ears. "Elena. That accident wasn't an accident." My breath caught. "What do you mean?" He stepped closer, whispering. "Caleb told me something right before they pushed him into surgery," Rick murmured. "He said the press moved before he hit both controls." "What?" I whispered. "The two-hand activation," he said. "One of the last safeguards we still had. If that failed, that means someone tampered with it. Or bypassed it," Rick said. "Or told someone to bypass it." The cold felt suddenly sharper. "Who would do that?" I asked. "Someone who needed the line running non-stop," Rick said. "Someone who didn't want false trips, not even for a second. Someone with enough power to order it without leaving a trace. Victor." The thought formed before I could stop it. Rick swallowed. "Elena. After your firing, they installed a new lock on the maintenance diagnostics room. Only 3 people have access now." "Victor," I said quietly. "Victor," Rick echoed. "And Grant. And corporate QA." My breath crystallized in the cold. This was no longer negligence. It was conspiracy. Rick glanced back at his truck. "They're scared," he said. "Your firing didn't fix the problem. Now they're scrambling, watching everyone. I think they know you might talk." "I haven't talked to anyone yet," I lied. He nodded. "They sealed the file on Caleb's incident," Rick continued. "It's classified internal high risk. That means only executives get to see the real report. And the rest gets rewritten for OSHA." I stared at him. "Elena. Whatever you're planning, be careful," he said. "If Victor finds out, he won't just ruin your career, he'll ruin your life." I didn't look away. "Then it's a good thing," I said softly, "that I don't have much left he can ruin." Rick's face tightened. "Elena. Thank you for this," I said, holding up the USB. "It won't be wasted." He reached out, touched my arm. "Don't fight them alone," he whispered. "I won't." I lied again. He got back into his truck and drove off, taillights fading into static red dots in the night. I stood alone on the overlook, wind cutting through my coat. The USB in my pocket felt like a live wire. Something inside me clicked. Not anger. Not vengeance. Alignment. The moment when everything that had been scattered suddenly locked into place. The slow burn part of revenge was ending. The ignition phase had begun. 4. The internal leak. 2 days later, a new message arrived in my inbox. No subject. No signature. No introduction. Only a link. A secure cloud folder. And one sentence. "You didn't deserve what they did. The truth deserves a voice." My heart pounded. Someone inside the company had sent this. Someone else who'd stayed silent too long. I clicked the link. Inside were documents far more explosive than anything I had. Executive meeting minutes discussing hiding scrap rates. Internal predictions showing risk of catastrophic part failure pursuit. Emails between Victor and Grant about massaging data for Midland. A written directive instructing supervisors to push through shifts regardless of minor safety stoppages. A confidential report titled, "Projected Liability Exposure, Should product defect become public? My hands shook as I opened the last file. The report outlined expected lawsuits, financial losses, cost projections for settlements, PR statements prepared in advance, strategy for blaming individual contributors to avoid corporate responsibility. The number circled at the top, $218 million in potential liability. Ironvale knew. They knew defective parts were going out. They knew the danger. They knew someone would eventually die. And instead of stopping the line, they built a playbook for damage control. My stomach twisted. This wasn't a manufacturing failure. It was a human failure. A moral collapse in slow motion. And I had the proof in my hands. 5. The conversation with Lena. That night, I called Lena, my whistleblower contact. She answered on the first ring. Elena? I have more, I said. More? Executive directives. Data falsification. Liability predictions. Safety reports intentionally suppressed. Silence. Then, Elena. This is no longer just an OSHA case. This could fall under federal fraud statutes. Safety violations affecting interstate commerce. It might involve NHTSA, maybe even the DOJ. I closed my eyes. What do? You have 2 options, she said. Her voice was calm. Level. Deadly. Serious. Option 1. File an anonymous safety complaint. It will be slow. Very slow. And Ironvale will see the storm coming long before it hits. I exhaled. Option 2? Become a protected whistleblower, she said. Officially. With your name. My throat tightened. If you do that, she continued, Ironvale cannot legally retaliate. But they will try in other ways. They will dig, discredit, threaten indirectly. It will be hard. But if you want real accountability, this is the only way. I stared at my own reflection in the window. Tired eyes, pulled back hair, a sweatshirt I'd worn 3 days in a row, a woman who'd already lost her job, her peace, her illusions. What else was left to lose? I'm ready, I said softly. Are you sure? She asked. Yes, I whispered. Elena, once you take this step, there is no going back. There wasn't any going back, I said, the moment they blamed me for their sins. Silence. Then Lena inhaled slowly. Okay, she said. I'll schedule the first official intake. And Elena? Yes? You're doing the right thing. I didn't feel brave. But I felt something stronger. Purpose. 6. The second accident. The next day, it happened. A new headline. Not in the middle of the newsfeed this time. At the top. Breaking. Second mechanical failure linked to Midland heavy-duty trucks. 1 critically injured. Investigation ongoing. My breath caught. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't chance. This was Ironvale's fingerprints showing up again. This time in twisted metal. And another body on a hospital gurney. I stared at the headline. At the snow falling outside. At my laptop glowing in the dark. The slow burn was over. The betrayal was complete. And the payback, the one they never saw coming, was no longer optional. It was inevitable. The second accident changed everything. Not for Ironvale. Not yet. Companies like that never feel the earthquake until the ground is already splitting. But for the investigators, the journalists, the regulators, the people whose job is to chase patterns through smoke, it was enough to raise heads, stir whispers, and start a quiet hunt for the truth. A truth Ironvale had paved over with polished memos and emergency NDAs. A truth I now carried like a burning coal pressed into the palm of my hand. 1. The intake. The whistleblower intake took place in a rented office suite, 2 towns over, in a building so nondescript it almost felt intentional. Beige walls, old carpeting, a coffee machine that looked like it predated the internet. Lena met me in the lobby. She was shorter than I expected. Brown hair pulled into a low bun, dark coat, calm eyes. The kind of calm that came from seeing too many people crack under pressure. Elena, she said, offering a hand. Let's get started. We sat in a small private room with a cheap table, a sound machine humming in the corner. She set up a recorder. For your protection, she said. And for the record, the questions began. She started with the basics: dates, names, chain of command. Then she asked me to describe everything: the sensor failures, my recommendations, the override, the accident. It is a load. The falsified quality data, the internal memos, the anonymous leak, the second accident. Every few minutes, she'd pause, rewind, replay a section. Engineers live in numbers. Regulators live in words. She needed both. When we were done, she turned off the recorder. "Elena," she said, leaning forward, "this is one of the strongest whistleblower cases I've seen in years. What you have isn't just negligence. It may constitute fraud, criminal endangerment, and deliberate misrepresentation to customers." I swallowed. "Will they know it's me?" "Eventually," she said gently. "But not at first." "Eventually," I repeated. "Once federal agencies start their inquiries, they will request internal documents. Ironvale will know someone leaked them. But with enough evidence, retaliation becomes illegal, and more importantly, risky." I nodded. But something in my chest tightened. Because I knew what men like Victor Hale did when they were cornered. They didn't get careful. They got violent, but the corporate kind of violent. The kind that didn't leave bruises but destroyed lives. Lena's voice softened. "You're not alone. Not anymore." I wanted to believe her. A part of me did. But another part, the part Ironvale had taught to survive in silence, stayed awake, waiting for the next blow. 2. The first strike back. It came sooner than expected. 2 days after the intake, I found a black sedan, idling outside my apartment. Not unusual. Except it was there again, the next day. And the next. Same car. Same dent on the passenger door. Same driver pretending to text. On the 4th day, I stepped outside with my trash and watched the sedan's engine rev as soon as I appeared. Not fast. Not threatening. But observant. Too observant. Someone was watching me. I texted Lena. "Me. There's a car that keeps returning to my apartment. Same driver. Same spot. Do whistleblower cases trigger surveillance?" Her reply was immediate. "Lena. Not from regulators. They barely have enough staff for paperwork. Elena. Be careful. This might be Ironvale." I felt the air thin. Of course it was Ironvale. Victor Hale didn't wait for storms. He sent scouts to check the wind. 3. The man in the coffee shop. The next morning, I went to a cafe down the street to clear my mind. The place smelled like roasted beans and burnt toast. Old men read newspapers. Students typed furiously. A barista, with pink hair, cursed under her breath as she tried to fix a jammed printer. Normal life. I ordered a black coffee and sat in a corner booth. 5 minutes later, a man slid into the seat across from me. Suit, tie, overcoat, hair graying at the temples, expression flat. I didn't know him. Not at first. Then he spoke. "Miss Ward." My stomach dropped. He flipped open a small leather wallet. Inside, a badge. Private investigator license. State of Illinois. Name: Philip Caro. My mouth went dry. "You're investigating me," I said. "I'm investigating potential misconduct," he replied, voice neutral. "Ironvale Manufacturing is a client." Of course they were. "What do you want?" He folded his hands neatly. "There are concerns," he said. "Concerns that you've shared confidential materials after termination. Concerns that you may be coordinating with outside parties to damage the company." I stared. He continued calmly. "Corporate asked me to determine if you pose an ongoing risk to company operations, and if so, to compile a profile." "A profile for what?" I asked quietly. "Legal strategy," he said. Then, after a beat, "And if necessary, preemptive action." I felt the temperature in the room drop. "Threatening me won't stop what's coming," I said. He smiled a fraction of an inch. "I'm not threatening you, Miss Ward. I'm informing you. There's a difference." He slid a business card across the table. "If you choose to cooperate," he said, "I can report that you're not a threat. That you've moved on." Harmless. The word hit me like a scalpel. "What happens if I don't?" I asked. His eyes softened the way someone's might when they talk to a terminal patient. "I will have to tell them the truth," he said. "That you're preparing something. Something that might hurt them." I leaned in. "Then tell them," I whispered. Every word. For the first time, his composure cracked. Just a flicker. But I saw it. Elena, he said quietly, you have no idea what these people are capable of. I do, I said. I used to work for them. He held my gaze for a long moment. Then he stood. Be careful, he said, for your own sake, and walked out. My coffee had gone cold. I didn't touch it. 4. Grant's secret. The next twist came from the last place I expected. Grant Rook, the plant manager who'd fired me. It was 9:12 p.m. I was eating leftover pasta when my phone buzzed with a text. Grant, I need to talk. Not as your former boss. As someone who made a mistake. My blood ran cold. I didn't respond. 5 minutes later. Grant, please. It's about Victor. And the report you never saw. I stared at the screen. Then I typed. Me. Location. He replied instantly. Grant. Riverside Park. South Bench. Bring no devices. No devices. No devices. My pulse quickened. This wasn't a conversation. It was a confession. Or a trap. Maybe both. But I went. 5. Riverside Park. The snow had stopped. But the night remained sharp with winter's teeth. I approached the south bench. Grant sat with his elbows on his knees, staring at the frozen river. His breath plumed like smoke. He heard my footsteps and didn't turn. You came, he said. You asked, I replied. He exhaled hard. Elena. I'm sorry, he said quietly. For that day, on the factory floor. You signed the papers that blamed me. I did, he whispered. Silence stretched. Then, I didn't know everything. I blinked. What? He finally looked at me. His face was tired. Older. Like the company had aged him years, in weeks. Victor kept me out of the real investigation, he said. HR too. They only showed us the version they wanted us to see. The one where your authorization caused everything. And you believed it? No, he said, shaking his head. But they made it clear. If I questioned it, my job was next. Cowardice. But human cowardice. What changed? I asked. He swallowed. There's another report, he whispered. A report only corporate executives saw. The real root cause analysis. My heartbeat stumbled. What does it say? He looked at me, eyes full of something like regret. That the two-hand control system was disabled from the executive override terminal, he whispered. At the same time your sensor was bypassed. My blood froze. You mean? Yes, he said. Someone higher up manually disabled the final safety mechanism. Someone with access to the diagnostics room. Victor. It had to be Victor. Why? I asked, voice low. Because the Midland order was behind schedule, Grant said. And the two-hand system slowed down production by 2 seconds per cycle. 2 seconds. 2 seconds per part. Multiply that by thousands. A delay Ironvale couldn't afford. So they removed the last line of defense, I whispered. Grant nodded. It wasn't negligence, Elena, he said softly. It was intentional. My breath trembled. He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded page. This is a copy, he said. I printed it before they locked the file. He handed it to me. I unfolded it under the dim park light. At the top, internal use only. Unauthorized distribution prohibited. Below it, root cause analysis. Incident on press line 4. Then, in cold corporate language, direct contributing factor. Executive override engaged on safety module. Two-hand activation protocol temporarily disabled to maintain production metrics. I felt sick. Grant spoke again. Elena. Victor is covering his tracks. He's blaming everyone else. And now he's preparing a narrative that frames you as a disgruntled ex-employee trying to sabotage the company. I looked up sharply. How do you know that? Because I heard him, he whispered. On a call. He said, she's not a problem yet, but she will be. Handle it quietly. My stomach dropped. I don't know what you're planning, Grant said, voice trembling. But if you're going to expose him, do it soon. Footsteps sounded behind us. I turned. A shadow moved through the trees. Grant's face went pale. That's my cue, he said urgently. They're watching me too. He stood. Elena, be careful. Victor isn't just trying to save Ironvale. He's trying to save himself. Then he walked into the darkness, disappearing between bare branches. I held the report in my shaking hands. A piece of truth more dangerous than any weapon. 6. The truest betrayal. I went home with adrenaline buzzing under my skin like electricity. Outside my apartment, the black sedan waited again. Not surprising. Not subtle. But this time, something else waited too. A voicemail. From a number I recognized. Rick. My pulse sped up. I hit play. His voice came through tight, strained, panicked. Elena, don't come to the plant. Something's wrong. They know someone gave you files. Victor's furious. A crash. A muffled shout. Something metallic hitting a surface. Then Rick's voice again, barely audible. Elena, I'm sorry. I tried. The voicemail cut out. My phone slipped from my fingers. Rick, the only man brave enough to hand me the truth, had just been silenced. Or worse, the slow burn had officially ended. The war had begun. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in the dark, Rick's cut-off voicemail replaying in my head on a loop. The crash, the shout, the apology. By dawn, every worst-case scenario had played out behind my eyes. Rick dragged into an HR office and gutted on paper. Rick escorted out by security. Rick, accidentally, injured on the job. Rick disappearing into the quiet statistical graveyard of former employees. Men like Victor didn't have to threaten people directly. They just had to remind you how easily you could lose everything. At 6:14 a.m., I sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad and a pen. The external drives stacked beside me, like small, silent bricks of compressed truth. No more waiting. No more slow burn. It was time to strike the match. 1. Locking the fuse. Lena, it's me. She picked up on the second ring, her voice already alert. Elena? What happened? They're escalating, I said. I think Rick's in trouble. I think Victor knows the leak is bigger than he realized. I told her about the voicemail. About the private investigator. About Grant's report. About the feeling that the ground under my feet was tilting. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she exhaled slowly. Okay, she said. We can't wait for bureaucratic timelines anymore. We'll push OSHA and NHTSA to open formal investigations on the record. I'll send a pre-brief with the documents you've given me. But there's another angle you need to consider now. Which is public pressure, she said. Regulators move faster when the world is watching. I stared at the grain of the table. You mean the press? Yes. She paused. I know I told you to prioritize agencies first. Normally, that's the safer play. But this company, she sighed. They're already trying to control the narrative. If they succeed, they'll make you look unstable, vindictive. The more they get to tell their story unchallenged, the harder it becomes to introduce the truth. The truth. I have a journalist in mind, I said quietly. I looked her up weeks ago. Good, Lena said. Reach out through her secure channel. Don't send everything at once. Let her know regulators are being notified. If she's smart, and she is, she'll time the story to land when it does the most damage. Damage? I repeated softly. It's not revenge for revenge's sake, Lena said, as if she could hear the conflict in my voice. It's consequence. There's a difference. I wasn't sure Ironvale would see it that way. But the families driving Midland trucks on winter highways? They might. Okay, I said. I'll contact her. And Elena? Yeah? Back everything up, she said. Twice. Use encryption. Assume they will try to discredit you, hack you, intimidate you. Let them find noise. Never the signal. I already did, I said. There was a pause. Of course you did, she murmured. You're an engineer, too. The journalist. Her name was Harper Quinn. Pulitzer finalist once, years ago. Investigative pieces on rail safety, mine collapses, a meatpacking plant that hid worker injuries behind falsified forms and aggressive NDAs. She had the kind of byline corporations hated, the kind that made boards schedule emergency meetings. I opened her secure drop page. If you have documents or information about corporate wrongdoing, especially involving safety, labor, or public risk, use this encrypted channel to contact me. I cannot promise what story I'll tell. I can only promise I'll chase the truth. I typed. Asterisk. My name is Elena Ward. Until recently, I was a senior process engineer at Ironvale Manufacturing. We produce critical components for Midland trucks. I have evidence that Ironvale systematically falsified quality data, bypassed safety systems, and concealed internal reports predicting catastrophic failure. There have already been 2 public accidents, possibly linked to these parts. One worker at the plant is permanently injured. The company blamed me to protect executives. I was terminated and asked to sign an NDA. I have documentation showing the true causes. Regulators are being notified. But Ironvale is already trying to rewrite the story. If you're interested, I can provide encrypted files. You should assume they are watching me. And once this moves, they'll be watching you too. Asterisk. I attached a stripped-down packet, a few memos, the redacted root cause analysis, a slice of the scrap rate manipulation spreadsheet with key names visible. Then I hit send. The confirmation message blinked. Message received. For your safety, this page will not display future status. I closed the laptop. My heart didn't race. It beat slow and heavy, like it understood what I'd just done. I hadn't just lit the fuse. I'd handed the match to someone who knew exactly where to throw it. 3. The recall rumor. 3 days passed. Then 4. An uneasy quiet settled in. The black sedan outside my building vanished. That should have made me feel safer. It didn't. Silence felt less like a mercy now, and more like a strategy. On the 5th day, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Unknown. This is Harper Quinn. I read your packet. I have questions. My pulse kicked. We arranged a call. Her voice, when it came through, was steady. No nonsense. Waited with the habit of listening for lies. First, Elena, she said. I verified your employment with Ironvale. I cross-checked some of the contract numbers mentioned in your files with public procurement records. They match. So let's establish something right away. I don't think you're making this up. I exhaled a breath I didn't know I was holding. But, she continued, if I go to print with this, the blowback will be enormous. Ironvale. Midland. Maybe even regulators that should have caught this earlier. I need it airtight. Corroborated. Multiple sources, documents, not anecdotes. I have documents, I said. And you're not the only one listening. OSHA, NHTSA? Yes, she said. I've already heard whispers that something's brewing with Midland. There are internal rumors about a possible recall if they find systemic defects. A recall? I whispered. Don't get ahead of it, she warned. Companies do a lot of talking about potential actions they never take. But if what you're telling me is true, they might not have a choice. I told her everything, not just about the data, about the culture, the pressure, the way Grant had been pushed, the way Rick had been cornered. The private investigator. She interrupted only to clarify, to ask for dates, ask how certain words were spelled. Do you trust Grant? She finally asked. I don't know, I said honestly. I think he's scared. I think he's trying to save what's left of his conscience. And Rick was, the kind of man who fixes things with his hands when no one's watching. He didn't sign up to be a whistleblower. He just didn't want his people to die. On the other end, I heard typing. Okay, Harper said. Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to request comment from Ironvale and Midland about some inconsistencies we've found in public data versus plant-level reports. I won't mention you by name. Not yet. But they'll feel the heat. They'll know it's me anyway. Yes, she said. They probably will. But by the time they connect the dots, I intend to have a story on the verge of publication and a few very nervous regulators watching over my shoulder. My throat tightened. Harper? Yes? If this all blows up, and I lose everything. I stopped. She finished the sentence for me. Was it worth it? She said quietly. I swallowed. Ask me that when a Midland truck doesn't kill someone's family because of a part we knew was bad, I said. There was a beat of silence. Then, that's not how you talk when you're lying, Elena, she murmured. I'll be in touch. 4. The Purge. The next week was a storm I watched from inside a locked room. I didn't see the emails, the calls, the emergency meetings. I heard them secondhand. Miguel texted me. Miguel. Something's up. Corporate suits everywhere. QA locked in conference rooms. People whispering, recall. 2 hours later, Miguel. They're pulling random batches off racks. Inspecting every arm like it's a crime scene. Grant emailed from a burner account. Victor ordered IT to audit and archive old logs. That's code for wipe anything that looks bad. Some of us are quietly making extra copies. If this goes down, he's not taking us all with him. Harper messaged. Ironvale refused to answer specific questions. Midland's PR team sent a very polished, "We are committed to safety" statement that said nothing at all. NHTSA, however, just announced a preliminary evaluation into Midland suspension failures. You did that, Elena. Indirectly. Don't lose your nerve now. The next day, it hit the news. NHTSA opens investigation into heavy-duty Midland trucks. After reports of possible suspension failures, the article was cautious. Regulators are careful with their words, but the subtext was loud. Something was wrong. Someone had noticed, and in the boardroom at Ironvale, walls were starting to close in. 5. The private investigator. Again, the black sedan came back. This time, it didn't park outside my building. It waited down the block. I spotted it as I walked home from the grocery store. The driver's profile was familiar. Caro. The private investigator. I didn't change my pace. If they wanted to watch me now, let them. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Unknown number. I answered. Elena, a man said. Don't hang up. I recognized the voice. Caro. Yes. What do you want this time? I asked. Another warning about how your clients play dirty? No, he said. This time, I'm calling for me. I stopped on the sidewalk. A dog barked somewhere behind a fence. The air smelled like exhaust and snow. Go on, I said. They hired me to dig up leverage on you, he said. Financial records, old emails. Anything that could make you look unstable, vindictive, reckless. Of course they had. And did you find any? I asked. He hesitated. No, he said. You're boring. I almost laughed. Then why are you calling? Because they crossed a line, he said quietly. Victor asked me to help reshape the evidence trail if regulators come sniffing around. He didn't say, destroy. He didn't have to. I know what that language means. You signed up to protect corporate interests, I said. Not to help them commit crimes. Believe it or not, he replied. I have lines I won't cross. And covering up something that might kill people is one of them. I leaned against a brick wall. What are you saying, Caro? I'm saying I've been documenting everything, he said. Every conversation. Every instruction. Every time they asked me to lose something. If this goes to court, I'm not going down as their hatchet man. I'm willing to testify. I let that sink in. Why tell me? I asked. Because you're the only one honest enough to be dangerous to them, and sane enough not to be dangerous to everyone else. That's almost a compliment. Don't get used to it, he said. I'll be in touch when this hits the next stage. Until then, stay alive. He hung up. I stared at my phone. Ironvale had hired a blade. The blade had turned in their hand. 6. Detonation. Detonations in the corporate world rarely happen with explosions. They happen with press releases and push notifications. The first one came from Midland. On a Tuesday morning, my news app flashed. Midland announces voluntary recall of HD 400 trucks over suspension concerns. I opened the article. Midland cited a potential defect in suspension components manufactured by a third-party supplier. They did not name Ironvale. They never do, not at first. But I knew who they meant. The second blast hit an hour later. Harper's article. The cost of cutting corners. Inside the factory, behind Midland's failing parts. By Harper Quinn. I read it with my heart pounding. She'd done it. She'd told the story. Not my story. The story. The one where scrap data had been massaged to protect contracts. Safety systems were bypassed to meet quotas. Workers had been hurt and silenced. Internal documents predicted disaster and chose profit anyway. She quoted anonymous sources. A maintenance supervisor, a plant manager, a press operator, a former quality engineer. None named. All real. She described the two accidents. Caleb's missing fingers. The near misses. The culture of quiet threats and subtle punishments. She mentioned me once. One former engineer, fired after a high-profile accident and asked to sign a broad non-disclosure agreement, alleges she was scapegoated for decisions made at the executive level. Regulators are now reviewing documents that appear to back up her claim. No name, but enough. Ironvale's stock price chart, at the side of the article, was already bleeding red. Harper ended the piece with a line that lodged under my skin. Machines do not choose to fail. People choose what risks they're willing to take with other people's lives. The question now is not whether Ironvale cut corners, but who, at the top, signed off when the cutting began. The third detonation arrived that afternoon. A photo, sent by Grant. Thought you'd want to see this. It was grainy, taken from a distance. Men in dark jackets walking into Ironvale's front office. On their backs. 3 letters. FBI. 7. The fall of Victor Hale. It didn't happen overnight. Empires rarely collapse in one day. They crack, then crumble. First, Victor vanished from public view. No more company-wide emails. No more PR statements with his name under them. Official word was that he was on leave, pending the outcome of ongoing reviews. Unofficially, everyone knew he was hiding. Then came subpoenas. Regulators demanded internal reports. Emails, logs, meeting minutes. Some of those had been scrubbed, but not all. You can never erase everything in a place built on systems and redundancies and backups. You always miss a copy. A shadow. A note someone printed and forgot in a drawer. And some people, like me, like Rick, like Grant, had been quietly saving the things that mattered. Midland, trying to salvage its own image, cooperated aggressively. Ironvale's board did what boards always do. When the fire gets too close, they looked for someone to throw into it. They found Victor. Within a month, the headline came, Ironvale VP of Operations resigns amid federal probe. Resigns. That was the polite word. The less polite one involved being forced out of a back door with a box of sanitized personal effects while lawyers argued over who'd take the fall if criminal charges stuck. Harper called me the day the resignation went public. You did that, she said. Not alone, I replied. True, she said. But you were the first domino. I thought of Victor, sitting in some expensive office, signing off on memos that treated human lives like variables in a spreadsheet. A part of me wanted to feel triumphant. Mostly, I felt tired. What about Rick? I asked. Off the record? She said. He's okay, rattled, lawyered up. But okay, I hear he might be a key witness if this becomes a criminal case. My chest loosened. And Caleb? Midland wants to settle quietly, she said. But his lawyers, good ones, courtesy of a certain nonprofit, are pushing hard. The number they're talking about starts with a 7, and that's before punitive damages. 7 figures. No amount of money grows back fingers. But it could buy his kid a future, at least. And Ironvale? I asked. That, Harper said, is the real question. 8. What remains? Ironvale didn't die suddenly. It bled out. First came the recall costs. Then the lost contracts. Midland looked elsewhere. So did 2 smaller clients, whose names never made the news, but whose business had quietly kept Ironvale afloat. Insurance premiums spiked. Regulatory fines landed. Investors fled. Rumors of restructuring became rumors of acquisition. One morning, Miguel sent me a single line. Miguel, they sold us. A private equity firm. Lean. Efficient. Merciless. A month later, Miguel. New owners. New name. Old sign came down today. He attached a photo. Workers removing the Ironvale, manufacturing letters from the front of the building. Metal scraped metal. A logo scraped off a history. I watched the image for a long time. They hadn't demolished the plant. They'd repainted it. Companies rebrand. Cultures don't. Not easily. But maybe, under different ownership, with regulators glaring and the press still sniffing, the new version of that place would hurt fewer people. Maybe. 9. Aftermath. 6 months later, I had a new job. Midland had offered me one quietly, through a back channel. Consultant on safety and supplier risk. I almost said no. Working for a company that had once looked the other way felt like a betrayal of what I'd just done. But they didn't pretend to be innocent. The manager who interviewed me said, "We missed things we should have caught. That's on us. We can't rewrite that, but we can change how we work going forward. We need someone who understands how the lies happen inside a plant and who's proven they'll tell the truth even when it costs them." So I took it. Not because I wanted another corporate badge, because I wanted a chance to design systems that couldn't be bypassed with a shrug and a signature. On my first day, they handed me a visitor's badge for a tour of a different supplier's facility. I clipped it on. The plastic felt lighter than the old Ironvale badge ever had. 10. One more visit. Before I started full-time, I drove out to the old plant. The sign was different now. New logo. New font. Same concrete. Same machines humming inside. I parked just beyond the security gate and walked up to the fence. Snow dusted the gravel. The air smelled like steel and coolant. Press line 4 still stood where it always had. I could see it through a gap in the open bay door. Yellow guardrails. A new interlock unit. A digital screen flashing diagnostics. For a moment, my chest tightened. I pictured the day they fired me. The crowd. The accusation. The way my badge had felt on my chest, heavy and useless. Then I pictured something else. I pictured the trucks taken off the road because of the recall. The ones that wouldn't be jackknifing across black ice with broken suspension components. The families that would never know how close they'd come to dying because someone, somewhere, chose safety over silence. My phone buzzed. A message from Caleb. "Caleb. Settled today. It's enough. For surgeries. For my kid. For breathing again. Thank you, Elena. You didn't have to do any of this. But you did. And it mattered." I stared at the message until my vision blurred. The wind stung my eyes. Or maybe that was something else. I typed back, "Me. You deserved better from all of us. Take care of your hand. And your son. That's all the payback I need." I slipped the phone into my pocket. Stood there, listening to the presses thump in the distance. Machines don't learn from their mistakes. People do. If they choose to. I turned away from the fence and walked back to my car. They had fired me at 4:17 p.m. on a Tuesday. They'd tried to write me out of their story. But stories don't belong to the people who sign the checks. They belong to the people who bleed when things go wrong. And sometimes, if those people are very, very stubborn, they come back with the truth in their hands and let it do what steel and oil never can. End things. And start something better.